Yo, let's go, and welcome back to part 2 of the interview with Floopus. We finished talking about the last couple bosses in Blackwing Lair, what type of consumes they're bringing for the whole raid, and their plans for the rest of Season of Mastery. Don't forget about the outtakes at the end, but let's jump back into it. So another fight that you have the top DPS on for Phase 5 is the duo Ebonroc Flamegor. Is it one fight now? You can't do them separately?
Ebonroc Flamegor is now a single fight. You have no option to tank them separately. They both aggro at the same time, no matter which one you target. The thing about this fight is they're very annoying, and you have to keep them separated. You can't let them near each other because they have what I like to call 4 horsemen stacks. If you remember 4 horsemen from Naxx, if you were around one of the horsemen too long, you got a brand on you that dealt damage to you if you spent too much time near them. Ebonroc and Flamegor have that now. Ebonroc has a shadow brand and Flamegor has a fire brand. So when you spend time near each of them, you start stacking up this damage on you. So you can only really be near one at a time. So as a Boomkin, I start the fight with Flamegor near the stairs that you would normally be tanking those dragons near. And I deal as much damage as I can to Flamegor. I'm using Dark Rune on cooldown. I'm using a Mana Pot as soon as I can, and I'm using my Innervate pretty early. And then as soon as I get to 3 stacks of that debuff, I go to Ebonroc. So I run my lunar turkey butt all the way over to where Ebonroc is being tanked. And then I deal damage to Ebonroc until I get 3 stacks, and then I go back to Flamegor and back and forth until they're dead. You have to kill them both at the same time, because if you don't, one of them gets very angry that you killed the other one, and then starts enraging and one-shotting people. So it's a bit of a longer fight. It can be longer. Tanks have to do tank swaps because of threat drops. There are still only like Onyxia type breaths, like Shadow Breaths you have to dodge. It's still a pretty rough fight. And from the Boomkin side of things, this is one of like the most downrank heavy fights. There are really no tricks to this. It's kind of just a constant back and forth. You're casting as much as you can. So I'm downranking a lot this fight. My max rank Starfire right now is rank 6. I'm barely I use that at the beginning of the fight when I have my Toep cooldown up and my Zandalar Hero Charm cooldown up. That's when I'll use like top rank, like highest rank Starfire. But after that, it's rank 3 and rank 1, depending on the rest of the DPS and how fast both the bosses are going down. Because that's the thing, you have 2 whole bosses worth of damage you have to deal. So you have to make sure not to run When I first started, I ran so quick. And then I would just sit around doing nothing. But now that I can downrank to like rank 1, it's much easier. But it's definitely a fight that tests your consume usage, your ability to hide using Innervate on yourself from your raid leader, and downranking.
This fight looked insane on the replay on Warcraft logs. There was so much movement going on all the dots. Like at one point there, one boss had 20%, the other had like 3.
Yeah, so because most of the DPS start on Flamegor, naturally Flamegor gets killed a lot faster. So what happens is you get Flamegor down to like 5%, and then you just get everyone to stop.
Yeah.
And then once everyone stops, then you go kill Ebonroc, and then once Ebonroc is low enough, then you kill them both. It does look precarious. If I were watching it on a replay, I would think that group had no idea what they were doing. But the whole fight is a dance. That's what you're doing the entire time. You're just dancing around back and forth, doing your best not to die to these stacking fire and shadow buffs. Now, they do wear out after like 30 seconds. If you don't take a stack, they go away. So you have to spend basically 30 seconds at each other area if you want the stacks to fall off. So the way it works is you want to make sure that not everyone is moving all at the same time. So you have your healers that are set on 1 stack, 2 stacks, and 3 stacks. So there's going to be people moving every time a stack comes up. It's very coordinated, but it's the best way to make sure that no one dies. It's the same with the tanks. They all also get the stacks, so they have to move in coordination. They have to wait for other tanks to come over to taunt. It's a whole big bunch of nonsense. But as a Boomy, all I have to do is not die and try not to run out of mana.
So how many tanks are you guys running right now?
There are 6 tanks for that fight. It's the only fight where you need so many, but you need 3 sets of 2 tanks. You need 1 set to be on each boss, and then you need a transition set to pick up when the bosses need to be moved and the tanks who have, or not the bosses, when the tanks need to move and the boss's aggro needs to be taken so the tanks can move to their new assignment. You can do it with 4. It does require a lot of responsibility, so we found that it's much cleaner using 6. It also makes the threat a lot more stable, which is really important because there have been a few times where when the fight begins, I will Starfire, Moonfire, double crit, and I don't care what people say about Boomkin, but that snap threat is insanity.
Yeah.
It's a very high amount of threat if you crit. So it's been very valuable for us running 6 tanks. It sounds crazy, and it kind of is, but that's what SoM is, right? It's just bananas. Everything's made up and the points don't matter.
Another thing that's crazy is this fight, for whatever reason, I noticed the only person that died, it looked like maybe somebody died throughout the fight and got a battle res, but the one death at the end of the fight happened like within a second of the fight ending. So even with all that chaos, everybody was still alive for the whole fight. A lot of the other fights I saw, 8, 10 people dying, and you guys got the boss down, but with all that chaos, it's amazing that everybody was still alive at the end.
That's definitely from a lot of hard work, from people getting used to the fight, and our honestly excellent raid leader communications. Like, they go over it before we get there every time in case we have new people, because again, we switch up our roster a lot for each of our raids, so people aren't always with who they were with before. So there's always an explanation. They're getting really good at it, and it's just easier to just explain it every time, and people are getting better as the weeks go on for understanding it and knowing what they need to do. DPS don't really have to do much. It's pretty much all in the tanks and healers, and they've gotten really good at it. Like, it's much smoother than it used to be.
Tell me the reason why you're not rank 1 and you're down to rank 5 for Chromaggus.
Okay, first of all, that's a very accusatory tone you're using.
Very.
Secondly, it's because that fight is totally RNG.
Mm-hmm.
So the one thing that stays the same about Chromag from Classic to now is that Chromag still just has vulnerabilities all the time. So it's always either Nature, Arcane, Shadow, Fire, Frost. The whole fight, he's going to have one of them. The reason why I don't have a 100 parse on that fight is because I can't get enough Arcane Nature vulnerabilities to do it. Because every time I run with my Boomkin, it's just Fire, Fire, Shadow, Fire, Frost, Fire. And there'll be like one Nature, but it's the one Nature where I can't go crazy, because it's either right at the beginning of the fight and then I would pull aggro and die, or it's at the end of the fight where I don't have enough time to make up for not having anything the whole raid, or the whole fight. That's the one thing that's similar about Chromag. Chromag himself, though, is actually crazy different.
It looks like it, because I see the boss getting pulled out into the middle of the room almost.
So you have to kite Chromag the entire fight. The reason why you have to do this is because he will... Okay, so all right, I should probably explain it this way. Chromag has breaths like he used to have, but instead of alternating between 2, he does all 5. He'll pick one at random every time he breathes. And it's not a cone in front of him. It is everywhere. It is 360 degrees around him. It will hit everybody if you don't have an ice block to block it. And you get an ice block from people dispelling debuffs that get put on throughout the raid, because Chromag just does that too. He puts his poisons and curses and magic afflictions on everyone. And every time one of those is dispelled or decursed or depoisoned, it leaves an effect on the ground. If you depoison somebody, it leaves this green cloud that runs around and puts people to sleep. If you decurse, it creates this shadow bolt that just travels slowly, lands on the ground, and blows up. When you dispel, when you demagic somebody, an ice block forms. These ice blocks last for 10 to 15 seconds, and you need to have an ice block up to hide behind when he breathes, because if you get hit with a breath, you get basically an improved version of the status effects that he did in like the original game. So really, you just don't want to get those because then you have to pop protection pots just to stay alive, and you better hope that you have your cooldown up. There are other things like there's a disease that when you get the disease, if you get de-diseased, the ground beneath the person gets set on fire. And then there's also bronze that you need hourglass sand for like normal, but it leaves an effect on the ground. It's a whole thing. The fight's chaos, and the reason you have to keep moving him is because of all these little status effects that are on the ground. They're all over the place, so you keep having to move him into better areas so that you don't just die to these status effects. So you're spending the whole fight moving and not trying to take aggro if it's your vulnerability, which is honestly mostly warlocks trying not to die. But I just haven't been able to get enough vulnerabilities for nature and arcane to get the 100 parse, because when I looked at the 100 parse, it was like all nature and arcane. I can't do that. That's like winning the lottery. So I don't get to choose it. I have to just wait and hope every week that things will change. And then I'll just get one that I want. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, but it was so rewarding when you did get that arcane or nature vulnerability, and you could just lay into Chromaggus.
Yeah.
Oh, that was
really
great.
good. The thing is, though, like especially with the new one, because there's so much movement and you need to be hiding and running around, one vulnerability isn't enough. Like I need like 3 or 4 to get that 100 parse.
Yeah, are there any guides at all for Moonkins and Season of Mastery?
No, none.
Acid Lockamere, is that a good weapon?
Is that a good weapon? That's what you sound like when you say that.
It went from Chromag to Chaos. So immediately after Chromag, there's no trash, and you get right into Nefarian's room. Are there still the 2 rooms that have all the dragon spawn? And you kill all of them, make sure you have your cloak on. If you don't, you hide behind the throne, and then Nef flies down and you fight the boss.
That about sums it up. The first phase is relatively similar. Fun fact, in the beta, or on the PTR before they released BWL, they made the ads come out of those tunnels like 5 times faster than they used to, and it was insanity. Like barely any groups could even get past that, let alone the actual Nef fight. So they nerfed it a lot. So now it's back to being relatively normal. So phase 1, yeah. Phase 1 is normal. All of your plebs who don't understand how to play the game and don't have Oni Cloak hide like little wusses because I didn't, purchase an Oni Cloak, and I'm only a little, a little jazzed about it. Phase 2, like Nef does come down like normal. Phase 2 is Nef, but more, like, most other fights in BWL. Nef does all of the normal things that Nef did before, does a Shadow Breath, does all of his class calls, all the effects that you're familiar with, but then he also does additional effects on all the class calls, so it's not just one anymore. There's more stuff. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'll go through a few, like, for instance, Warlocks. A Warlock class call, in addition to spawning an Infernal, spawns Shadow Bolts, like little Death Coil Shadow Bolt things, that just fly around the room. They deal like 300 damage each. They don't deal a ton of damage, but they're everywhere. They're these little nodes that they fly out from, and you just have to dodge these little itty bitty shadow bolts that are flying all over the map. Then there's paladins. For each paladin, a consecrate shows up on the ground. The paladin's weapons like animate themselves, and then there's a giant consecrate that you do not want to stand in, and it's all over the map. It's very annoying. Those are just 2 examples. There are a million other ones. Like rogues and warriors, their weapons come alive and start attacking people. Like in like AoEs, you have to move out of an AoE. For priests, there's a mind flay. You have to stand away from this like weapon that animates and starts mind flaying and mana draining the nearest target that has mana. So you have to move away from them. It's very annoying. But the fight generally plays out similar to the way it did before. You're still tanking up in the same place. You're still mainly DPSing and just trying not to die to mechanics. And then phase 3 is the same, where all the ads come back and you have to just nuke them down as fast as possible. So yeah, roughly the same fight. You're just dealing with a bunch more mechanics. So really, at the end of the day, there's no reason why I shouldn't have the number 1 parse, except that I'm bad at video games.
I mean, it looked like you had really good positioning there. You were by yourself for most of the fight, and then phase 3 happened. I feel like that's where you could really get a good parse if you had a good hurricane on all the constructs. Is The Stratham Holy Water, is that still a thing that you throw on the skeletons?
Strat Holy Water is what I use every time. My Boomkin is not engineering, so I don't have sappers, but Strat Holy Water is better for that specific fight. So I do drop Strat Holy Water. I did that fight, which if you watch a replay, you'll see that I dropped the Holy Water, don't kill a few of them, and then they come and kill me as I try to run away. Normally that doesn't happen. They just die, and I get like 25, 30,000 damage from that. It's quite a lot of damage. Sometimes it's actually that's from one pack. If I get both packs, I think the highest I've gotten is like 52k, which is just bananas. Maybe that's how I'll get the number one. Next week I'll just bide my time, wait for them both to gather, and then get 52k, then die, because that's what would happen. Yeah, I'll get the damage and then just die.
One of the first things I looked was, are you keeping Fairy Fire up? And you were not having to keep Fairy
I'm not
Fire
assigned,
up.
no.
It's the Resto Druid, I assume?
Yes, yeah. Resto Druids are assigned to Fairy Fire. I didn't even ask for that. The raid just prefers it that way. I mean, I was definitely willing to do that, but I wasn't even asked.
You touched on fire resist gear. Like, other than the cloak, you're not really using any other pieces throughout BWL for any boss, right?
As a Boomkin, there's really no reason to use fire resist gear anywhere. It's way too big of a DPS loss and doesn't really give you anything. I find it's much more useful to pre-pop greater fire protection potions if you're worried about fire damage. And I also use Juju Embers that I make from the Chartooth Echoes up in Winter Spring.
Other than fire resist potions, you said nature resist maybe for a fight or two. Are there any other nature, or not nature, spell resist potions besides fire and nature?
Yes. So I bring, I would say of the spell resist potions, I bring all of them besides Arcane to BWL. Because on Razorgore, I like to use fire mainly because Razorgore's fire breath hurts if you get hit by it and it's on the ground. It's really annoying. On Veil, you use fire. On Broodlord, you don't need to use anything. On Firemaw, you use fire and nature because that chain lightning that Firemaw does is nature damage. On Flamegor and Ebonroc, you use fire and shadow because Ebonroc's brand that he puts on you is shadow damage, so you need both fire and shadow. On Chromag, because Chromag has all these elemental things that drop on the ground, you need fire, frost, and nature. Those are the ones that deal damage. Fire drops fire on the ground. The frost comes from like a frost breath that could hit you. And nature comes from the like nature breath. It's not great. And then on Nefarian, it's not necessary, but I use shadow protection on Nefarian. It stops you from taking a bunch of damage if he decides to target you with his nonsense in phase 1 because he's like super bored and has nothing better to do. But on phase 2, it's very useful because the Warlock class call that has little shadow bolts flying everywhere, having a shadow protection potion on means that you don't get spell pushback if those hit you. So you can sort of just ignore them for at least a little bit.
So for Chromag, is the raid stopping? And isn't it a 2-minute cooldown? So you would pop one resistance potion, wait 2 minutes, pop a second one, wait another 2 minutes, pop a third one?
Yes. So after Ebonroc and Flamegor, we rebuff if that's necessary. And then, you start during that next trash pull before Chromag, you start popping your protection potions. We have a tracker that makes sure that everybody pops all 3, or at the very least fire and nature. And we do take time. Like, we will wait so that people can at least get 2 of those in, because the fight can be so damage heavy and have so much variance. You really don't want to screw over your healers. You don't want to screw over yourself. And it's definitely the hardest fight in BWL. So you want to do as much as you can to sort of mitigate the damage that you're going to take. And kind of everyone does that. Like, Boomkins do it too. Because even if I get a poison on me, I'm not allowed to dispel it. I can't get rid of the poison on me because it drops a debuff. Like, it drops nature on the ground that messes with the raid, so I'm not allowed to do that unless it's called for. So I also need to have all those potions on.
So Chromag is the hardest fight, you would say. What's your most favorite and least favorite fight? Is that also your least favorite because it's the hardest, or your favorite because it's the hardest?
It's my favorite because it's the hardest. I love challenges. It's one of the reasons I played SoM in the first place. I want things to be difficult. I enjoy having trouble downing things because it's been, regular classic got so autopilot for so many people, and it got a bit boring. Like, I wanted to feel how I felt when I was a kid being unable to kill things. Like, I wanted it to be such a challenge that it really got my mind racing and it really kept my attention. And of all of the fights in BWL, Chromag does the best job of that. I would say not as much anymore because we've got it on farm now pretty well. But we progged it. It took us 2 nights and like 6 or 7 hours. When we were progging it, and it felt like it used to. So I love Chromag. I think it's brilliant. On that similar thought process, I hate Broodlord because there's nothing. I think the idea that they had for it was cool. On paper, the idea of him charging and doing some crazy nonsense is actually pretty neat. But Broodlord's just not doing that. So it's very boring. I don't like it. I would also say that if I don't get Burning Adrenaline, which I never do, I don't like Veil because it's boring. Because I'm just sitting there getting interrupted on my billion-second-long Starfire casts. It's not very exciting. It's hard, but it's hard for healers and tanks. Not really hard for DPS. We kind of just sit there.
But are you only raiding BWL every week on your Boomkin, or are you raiding Molten Core and Onyxia still?
So currently, my Boomkin raids, all 3 raids. I will say Onyxia has slowed down. Not a lot of groups are running Onyxia currently. I am running MC and BWL every single week consistently.
Zolomon, you've gotten some gear from Zolomon. It's still a 3-day lockout. Have you been doing it every 3 days?
You mean ZG?
ZG, sorry. Yeah, I'm getting TBC
I know, because you're in TBC.
Oh, yeah.
I was just playing with you. Yeah, so it's on the 3-day lockout, which is really nice. Yes, I'm in there every 3 days. The main reason I'm in there now, so I wasn't there originally to get a lot of great gear that really helps a Boomkin be as competitive as possible. For instance, Blood Tinged gloves, like the cloth hit gloves that drop off Jindo. Absolutely amazing. Totally understated. Not enough people are like squawking about these gloves. They're so good. I'm actually using 3 pieces of gear right now from ZG. Now I think about it. I'm using Hexer's cover, which is the headpiece. It's 41 spell power, 10 stam, 10 int.
Yeah.
Which is better than what I was using, which was just 39 arcane. Like, it was the arcane wrath one, which is just 39 arcane spell power.
The master one, yeah. I saw you were wearing that master
the master hat. Mm-hmm. What I want is the Spellweaver Turban, which is the 1% hit for Ubers, but that's tough to get and doesn't drop all the time. Cover's great. 41 spell power, bunch of stats. I'm actually using 4 pieces because I'm using the Jeklix Opaline Talisman, which drops off one of the priests. It's like 22 spell power and 3 MP5.
Mm-hmm.
I also think people are sleeping on this because I don't think I'm replacing this necklace if it isn't with the one that drops out of Strat Live that has hit on it.
Yeah, the Cannon Master.
Choker of the Fire Lord.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm pretty sure those are the only 2 upgrades, and it's just so strong. 22 spell power is so much. Like, even the hit one out of Strat Live is 1% hit, but only 9 spell power.
It's not okay.
So I'd be giving up 13 spell power for that hit, which I definitely understand doing.
Yeah,
but it's a big sacrifice, and then obviously Cloak of Consumption because that thing is stupid.
See, I used to use the hit trinket from the Polymorph Turtle boss. What's that boss name?
Naphagel's Broken Reel.
I used to use the reel in Naxx.
Really?
For most of Naxx. I swear, one of the only Moonkin that used the reel, and I loved it. I used more spell power gear than hit gear, and I used that when I wanted to make sure I was gonna get some damage into the boss. And it worked well for me. It might not work well for you if you try it. I'm not suggesting you do it, but I use that reel a lot.
Well, now I have to go get it and try it, right? I never even thought to do that.
And if I like
to try everything. I like to confirm to myself if things are good or not, rather than
if I got to resist. If I use that trinket and I got to resist, though, I'd rage the rest of the raid night.
I'm pretty sure I would just drag delete it.
I was like, why did I wear this trinket? It's useless. It didn't do anything. So we've covered Blackwing Lair. Coming soon for you on your server should be AQ20 and AQ40 once the gates open. And then after that is really just Naxx Remus. Are you planning to do those 3 raids and finish out the first season of Mastery as a Boomkin?
Originally, I did not expect to continue so far, as it requires an incredible time investment and gold investment and gear acquisition and consume investment for things like AQ and Naxx. But now that I've played this much with it, yeah, I'm gonna do AQ20 a lot because it's a great easy dungeon to do, or easy raid to do. Then I will be in AQ40 as soon as I guess have the gear for it, and we have it a little bit more on farm, or at least parts of it on farm. And then I am 100% going to kill Kalthazad on my Boomkin, because that, to me, is just the most hilarious thing on the planet, is just running into KT's room on the hardest difficulty possible ever created and killing Kalthazad with a moon chicken.
Yes. Please do.
It just feels like that's the pinnacle of gaming.
Alright, so Floopus, we've covered everything in BWL for Boomkins. Thanks so much for taking the time to answer all the questions that I had for you. If you continue to parse, I might reach back out to get an interview again for AQ40 and Naxx. So are you going to try to keep parsing for the next couple raids?
I'm almost offended that you said if. As if that there is a world, as if there's a plane on Azeroth that I would not be the #1 parsing Boomkin. How dare you even say that to me? I don't even know what to think right now. I'm flabbergasted. Thank you for having me. But I did want to say, I think you're doing the Lord's work here, making a Boomkin channel, because more people need to know how awesome we are. All right, not enough people do, and it's a shame. So you're doing great things. Please keep doing it. And whenever you want to talk to a #1 person in the world, Boomkin on SoM, you will know to talk to me and nobody else ever. Open challenge. Please come beat me.
There we go. The gauntlet's been thrown down. The stake's been planted. So if you're trying to get that rank 1 spot, you've got Floopus to challenge. So thank you. That's the end of the interview. On to the outtakes. So
we're gonna fight Gar in a second.
Good luck on bindings. Well, if it drops, if it drops, cut me off. Let me know. That's some hype.
I will cut you off immediately. I will just screw you out. But thank you for bringing up that terrible, embarrassing situation where I don't have a 100 pars again. I really appreciate this. You're so great.
I mean, rank 5 is good for somebody.
No, it's not. Rank 5 is garbage. What am I going to do with a rank 5? You think I could go home and be like, look at me now, Dad, I have rank 5? No.
Yeah, all of that is going away.
What? Why?
I don't. Maybe.
That's great. That's good shit. What? I could just be some boring monotone person.
Yeah. Chromaggus. I did not get rank 1. Oh, so Lockamere is your excuse for getting #2.
Oh my god, a binding actually dropped.
What?
I swear to God.
Yes. You can tell that run, it was all because of me. You're going to get that reel.
I would love to get the #1 parse and have that reel on Warcraft logs as like the trait that I use.
That would be a meme for me only. Nobody else would get it, but you and I, we would know.